Thank you very much, everyone, for this opportunity. It's a great privilege for us to be here today to do this study. By no means, I know I'm no master, no lecturer. I'm just someone trying to help myself by studying and trying to share my doubts, my questions. The format of what we'll do here today is please do not leave questions to the end, because nobody asks questions in the end. Interrupt me, to correct me, to make a note, to ask a question, whatever you want to do. But don't leave anything to the end, because nobody asks questions in the end. And so, why are we here today to talk about thought? Why? That's the first thing I got to question is, well, so according to the Gospel, according to Spiritism, in the chapter that talks about Christ the Consoler, the Spirit of Truth, it says, Spiritists, love one another. That's the first precept. Educate yourselves is the second. So we are here today because of this. We're trying to educate ourselves, because if we educate ourselves, we can make choices based on things we know, not on things could have been told, might have been told at some point. In Proverbs 4:23, it says, well, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. In this context here, the heart is the source of thoughts. So guard your thoughts. That's what it means, because everything you do flows from your thoughts, from your mind. In that context, the heart representing that. In the past, about 2,000 years ago, in the context where Jesus lived, in the Hebrew people, the heart was, they used to believe that the heart was the center of the thought. The mind was in the heart, not to do with the brain. Because the head is something, and this is, I hope you all know Rondo Dutra. So according to his expositions or his presentations, he mentions that the head is considered too much external to hold something so important. So the torso was the source of all important things. So that, I hope this makes sense. So what's the motivation for this presentation today, for this discussion today? In the Spirit's books, question 459, the question asks, the Spirits influence our thoughts and our actions? And the answer, their influence upon them, thoughts and actions, is greater than you suppose, for it's very often that they direct both. So sometimes we are not even in control of ourselves, and it's relevant to understand how the thought is important to our existence, to our lives. The reason why we should consider thinking about it, meditating about it, or reflecting upon it. So there is this figure there. So first thing, what is thought? What is it? We talk about it, and okay, so not automatically, please stay there. So what is thought and how does it affect me? So this is the first question I would like to ask here to us to consider about it. So what is thought? Anyone? Jackie.
Thought. I think it's about energy to me. It's like you think about things because you're balancing in a certain energy and vibration, but thought is just what you do
It's
before
hard
you
one,
act.
isn't it?
Yeah, what you do before you act. So
It's like an expression of your feelings, right?
Yeah, so
yeah.
So we have here, so what is thought? Well, I don't really know. It's something that happens inside my head.
Yeah.
Something that I think, but I don't really know how to describe it. So let's ask this question to someone who could actually help us, like the dictionary. So a thought is a covert symbolic response to stimuli that is either intrinsic, intrinsic from within or extrinsic, so it's a response to something, some external excitation. A thought or thinking is considered to mediate between inner activity and external stimuli. So a technical answer for that. And according to Mr. Google, an idea or opinion produced by thinking or occurring suddenly in the mind. So this is a very catchy thing, occurring suddenly in the mind, because we will see that this occurrence could be actually a suggestion or influence of something else in context with this motivation here, isn't it? The influence upon them, our thoughts and actions, is greater than you suppose, for it's very often they, the spirits, who direct both. So let's go back there. If I'm too fast with the slides, please let me know, but I have a trend to be very dynamic in this shifting or changing. Okay, so a brief note here. I like to address this sentence every time I talk about anything in this spiritist context. So Saul of Tarsus, as he approached Damascus, Jesus appeared to him, and well, it was a surprise because I can't imagine what happened in his mind. He who persecuted the Christians, who was responsible for too many people being tortured and killed, then he realized, oh God, he exists. So, and his attitude was, what do you want me to do? So he surrenders. He doesn't question, he doesn't regret, he doesn't put any guilty afloat or anything. He just sets his state of mind to, Lord, what do you want me to do? So that's how he balances, how he tunes his mind and therefore his thinking when he realized that, well, there's something new, that his life just had changed. Something new happened. Jesus existed. So, from the Gospel according to Spiritism, there are a few questions and a lot of people that are not very creative, I would say, because Jesus says, love God above all things and your neighbor as yourself. And then St. Augustine said us to love one another. A protective spirit, same thing. St. Vincent, the same thing. Chevers, the same thing. And at least Fenelon was a little bit creative because he said, love one another and you'll be happy. So, what does it have to do with thought? What does love have to do with it? Well, we will connect the dots eventually. But the thing is, when we are, nobody said feel love. There's a difference between feel love, and to love. To love is to serve. To love is to act. It's an active situation. It's not just sitting on the sofa in the sitting room, looking at some beautiful picture and meditating and spreading, feeling love for the world. That's useless. So, to love is lift from the sofa and go do something for someone else, someone who needs. And when we help someone who needs, we actually help the most needed of us, ourselves. I hope this makes sense. So let's go back here. So what's thought and how do we use it? I don't know. Don't know the answer for that. But if we look at this card here, the distance separates us, the thought, the thinking unites us. So this is a very good picture, I suppose, because by the thinking, by the thought, by thinking of someone, by our thoughts, we establish a connection, a linkage. So we chain ourselves someone else, which could be something very good or not so good. So the thought is an attribute of the Spirit. In the Medium's book, chapter 2, we say that the thought is one of the attributes of the Spirit. And so what's an attribute? Asking Mr. Google again, we see that the attribute is a quality or feature regarded as a characteristic or inherent part of someone or something. Okay, so it's something inherent to spirits. Okay, so can the thought be used to communication or in communication? The medium's book says about the marvelous in the supernatural. A thought is one of the attributes of the spirit, again. So the possibility of transmitting is thought. It has its origin in the soul's psychological constitution. Okay, so the possibility of acting upon matter. So, sorry, I'm going to go back to this one here. So, the possibility of acting upon matter, of impressing the senses, and as a natural consequence of transmitting its thought. So, how does it mean? So, let's step back here a little bit, because I'm going to make a shortcut here, because I think it would make more sense. So, let's start from the beginning. How does the heat from the sun reaches the earth? That's a good question, isn't it? So it's through radiation. So radiation is something that the sun emits, travels over the space, and hits the surface of the earth that's facing the sun. So it hits the earth, it's converted into heat, and then it hits that side of the earth. Okay, so how does the radiation travel through space? Well, modern science says that radiation can travel through vacuum. So the vacuum is something that doesn't exist, and yet it does something. So there's one of the possible shortcomings of our current science, because as the Spiritist philosophy, the thought, teachings, or doctrine, whatever we want to call it, tells us that the whole universe is filled with the universal cosmic fluid, whatever we call it. We still don't know it, but we scientists are guessing or estimating that the amount of energy that they measure in the universe they can only justify that level of energy with about 8 or 9% of that energy with the known matter. So people are talking about the dark matter nowadays, that we cannot sense, we cannot weight, we cannot perceive it. So how can they talk about these things? Well, so anyway, so the universal cosmic fluid fills the whole universe. So thought is transmitted through it. It's the element that transmits the thought from one source to another, like two radios, like a TV antenna and a television. Okay, so I hope this makes more sense now. So haunted places, prayers and evocation. So to talk about prayer, is an evocation which attracts a spirit. It's not blue, but it's relevant, I suppose. So it's the thought which acts on a spirit. So whatever we do, it's in this context here, it's talking about prayer. So when we pray, when we are in the state of prayer, we sync our minds in a frequency, and we can send a message or establish a connection or chain ourselves to another spirit. Don't forget that we are spirits encapsulated in this amount of material matter body. Writing mediums or psychographs. So what's the primal cause of inspiration? The communication of his thoughts by a spirit. So when I am doing something and I establish a communication with a discarnate spirit, like a medium would do during psychography or mediunic painting, for instance, then what happens is that, well, we establish this connection, we chain ourselves to that spirit, and we receive his or her influence, doesn't really matter, through our thoughts. So, for instance, sometimes we are about to leave to work, and then we get this inspiration. Oh, did I turn the iron off? And then we go back home and we find it still on. So that could be an inspiration inspired by someone that doesn't want our house to catch fire, I suppose. Okay, evocations. So when we evoke a spirit by our thought, okay, so the Book of Mediums tells us that we can evoke whoever we want. at any time we want. So if I wanted to evoke St. John the Baptist here, or Evangelist here, either one, I could. It doesn't mean that he will come, but I can do that. So, and there's no point in evoking none of them at this moment, but if there were a situation in which they could be helpful, then I could, and they possibly would help. So manifestations are attestations of the presence of the Spirit, but it's your thought which attracts him. So our thought is this big magnet that when we turn it on, we attract whoever is on the other side of the chain. I hope this makes sense. The thought of a spirit is like a spark which throws out its light on all sides and may be perceived from all points of the horizon. So then again, the whole universe is filled with the universal cosmic fluid. And when I emit a thought, of course, the stronger my thought, the stronger the emission. So sometimes when we imagine this, we have a problem on our feet, one of our feet, our foot, and we are in a grocery store, in the supermarket, and someone passes with the cart in front of the trolley on top of it. So we feel that pain, that fraternal feeling fills our body, and we have that thinking of, oh, and we send that love to that person. Yeah? So we are sending a very strong thought, which is much more stronger than if someone just passes through and bumps into us and doesn't disturb us as much, but we don't like it. So there are different degrees of radiation or irradiation or emission, if I can say that. Okay, so fluids. The thought of the incarnated mind acts upon the spirit of fluids as that of the discarnated spirit for acts. So what does it mean is that, well, because we are incarnated and we are under this protection of the matter, of the body, sometimes we don't perceive, we don't think of it, because we are trapped in the material things we can see, perceive. So sometimes we don't assess how our thought can be strong or how can it affect things, or sometimes we don't believe it. But what it's saying here is that there's no distinction between incarnate and discarnate when it comes to the emission of thoughts. Then again, this has been asked again, and it's in red because it's quite important. So the spirits influence our thoughts and actions. Yes, they do, and sometimes they direct us, they guide us in whatever good or not so good way. Is there any use in praying for others? We possess in ourselves, through our thought and our will, a power of action that stands far beyond the limits of our corporeal sphere. So what does it mean? It means that when we pray for anyone, we will send this energy, and it will arrive, it will reach the destination, it will arrive in the person we think of. Okay, so who never read the mediums, Heaven and Earth, Earth and Hell. Heaven and Hell, Jesus, it's difficult, isn't it? Who never read Heaven and Hell here?
What's the Pushkin first?
Céu e Inferno.
Okay.
So in Heaven and Hell, there are two parts. So the second part is testimonies of discarnate spirits, and every one of them are saying at some point, they say, not everyone, most of them say at some point that either they are grateful for the prayers that were told on their behalf, or they ask for prayers. So, because that's the only thing we can do for discarnate spirit is to pray for him or her, or for the spirit, because that's what the spirits need. I won't go there because that's another topic, so let's go back here. So, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, ask it shall be given, a transmission of thought. So, praise and invocation through which, by means of thought, man enters into communication with the being. So, the thought is that chain. I'm using the word chain because, well, it's a link, but sometimes when we don't have a not so good thought, that changes us to something that we might not want to. So, just to reinforce that idea. Spiritism makes the act of prayer understandable by explaining how thought is transmitted. All incarnate and discarnate beings are immersed in the universal cosmic fluid, which occupies space. The whole universe is filled by it. And as we on Earth are immersed in the atmosphere, this fluid receives an impulse from willpower, which is the vehicle of thought, just as air is the vehicle for sound. Does it make sense to everybody? Okay? We can imagine that our thought is like an electromagnetic wave, like the television signals or the cell phones, waves that could link a cell phone with a tower. So here in the Gospel according to Spiritism, the chapter asking shall be given, we have the act of prayer, transmission of thought. So in item 10 we have, so when a thought is directed at someone either on earth or in space, from an incarnate to a discarnate being, or vice versa, a fluid current established between them, which transmits the thought from one to the other, just as air transmits sound. I think it cannot be clearer than this. So whenever we think of someone, we establish that chain. We establish that link. So why sometimes, for instance, if I think of someone, it's not, the person doesn't necessarily think of me back because I established the chain. Well, because we are under this armor of matter. Sometimes the person does, sometimes the person does not. It's not unusual for mothers to have intuitions about sons and daughters. So why is that? Well, because there is this connection. The energy contained in this current remains proportional to the force behind the thought and the desire. So as I said, when someone steps over a hurt foot, for instance, that's going to generate a very, very strong fraternal response, could generate from the person. So how the spirits hear the prayers. So this is how the spirits hear the prayers. This is also how spirits communicate among themselves. So two discarnate spirits, they don't have vocal cords or mouths, throats to talk, do they? They don't use air for that. So they use the thought to communicate, to link themselves. We see in the work of André Luiz that we have our, like a big Rolleiflex file in our minds that can be accessed by our pure spirit. So if someone more developed with the right skills approaches us, he or she can see our past in our memory. Things that we don't even know we did, thank God, sometimes. So not only communicate, but also have access. Yes?
Sorry to interrupt. It's just that.
Don't be sorry. It's
Anyway,
help.
it's just that this is what we just said of this communication between us and spirits with us.
Well, we are
This, yeah, but like incarnated and not incarnated. This resonates with a question that I always ask myself, especially since I began to do the Vegetical at home, mostly by myself. And so I had two questions when I started doing it. Is first, if we communicate to the spirits through thought and prayer.
Prayer is a thought.
Prayer is a
directed thought. Yes.
One, why the need or the strong recommendation to actually speak out loud when you're the only living person in the room? And the other question I had to myself is, and if I have to speak out loud, in which language do I do it, and does it matter?
There are two reasons for that. The first, to be honest and respond and answer your question with the most sincerity I could find in myself is, I have no idea. But we can make some considerations about it. So when you are saying something out loud, you are focused on doing it. When you're thinking about something, something else the cat, the egg, the house, the job, the work, the fiancé. You're not fully dedicated to it. When you talk about something, your whole being is concentrated in saying that. So that could be one explanation, because then it helps you to focus or concentrate your thought into the action you are in. With respect to language, no, absolutely no, because they don't hear what you are saying. They perceive the thought you are emitting, because they don't have ears, do they?
Yeah, because this question came to me when I was reading the work of André Luiz.
Yep.
In the Nostra book, there is this passage when they are essentially doing a work to help energize during the beginnings of what I managed to be World War I, and so they have to cooperate with other centers for the other countries, and then they also bring like translator spirits to coordinate the work between like the French spirits and the Brazilians. Like, don't they just think to each other? They need translators in between?
Yeah, but you have to remember something. Yeah. Sometimes you are too attached to the matter, and your mind is not free enough to allow you to have this flexibility. So some people discarnate and they stay attached to a house.
Mm-hmm.
Some other people, they don't even know. There is a passage in one or more presentations from I will do the years that he says, well, in this mediumship meeting, the discarnate, the medium incorporated a discarnate spirit, and they started to talk, a mediator and the spirit, and the mediator asked, do you believe in life after death? And the answer was something like, of course not. But you might have good reasons to believe about it now. So you see, depending on how we are, we may have difficulties to actually let go of things. I hope this makes sense.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, discarnate spirits, they don't have physical bodies, so they don't have ears, they don't have eardrums, they don't have any of those elements to allow them to perceive the motion of the sound waves. So they actually receive our thoughts. And also, keep in mind one thing. There was this passage that Chico Xavier was doing his studies on the gospel, and for a long time, 2 years, he was the only person alive, incarnate person present, and he asked Emmanuel, so why am I doing this? Because I'm alone here. Why am I holding this? So Emmanuel asked permission, and his vision was broadened, and 4,000 spirits, discarnate spirits, attended to those meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Because these meetings, they are used by the benefactors to bring spirits that are about to incarnate, spirits that are sleeping, and so they're used. And our function in those situations is actually to hold the event, to provide a place and time for them to do their work. That's what we have to do. So the right state of mind and the punctuality of doing that on Monday at 9 o'clock in the evening, every Monday. Because of course you cannot expect a whole range of people being available to your convenience. Yeah. I hope this makes sense. So that's how they transmit their inspirations to us, and that's how contacts are established at the distance between incarnate. So we cannot be. Sometimes we don't perceive this connection, this link, because of the filter that the matter applies on us. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So when a thought is directed at someone, either on Earth or in space, because who's the transmitting element of the thought is the universal cosmic fluid. So it is everywhere, isn't it? So it doesn't stop on the boundaries of the Earth. From an incarnate to a discarnate being, or vice versa, a fluid current is established between them, which transmits the thought from one to the other, just as air transmits sound. I hope this picture is I think this picture is very clear. I borrowed this without asking permission, so I might be inflicting some copyright laws here. Okay, so heaven and hell, fear of death. Why spirits are not afraid of death? Well, for the spirit, the soul is not an abstraction, for he knows that it possesses an eternal body which makes of it a real and defined being, susceptible of being conceived of as such by our thoughts. So then again, it's just that everything conceived as such by our thoughts, so we can conceive it. Okay? In Happy Spirits, in chapter 2, so Jean Renaud, giving an answer, he said that, well, and this sympathy in our case has been hindered all the closer by your constant thought of me. So this discarnate spirit giving a testimony that, well, there was this connection being established every time someone else thought of him. So this is just to make an example of how discarnate perceived the thought. Hope it makes sense. Thought and Life, it's a book from, I won't talk much about this, but this book is here to instigate you to read it. So, thought is a creative force to be externalized of the creature that generates it through subtle waves in circuits of action and reaction in time. So then again, it's a creative force that, when we think about something or someone, we emit this energy. And it's transmitted through the universal cosmic fluid. I think that's been established. The human mind is a mirror of light, emitting rays and assimilating them, we repeat. Okay, so we emit rays. Rays is, of course, it's a comparison because we're talking about electromagnetic waves here, not necessarily the way we see light with our material eyes. But then again, that's this idea of transmitting and receiving at all times. We are a big antenna. Well, not so big sometimes. Okay, so on the spiritual level, the discarnate man will deal more directly with a living, multiform fluid, a byproduct of the cosmic fluid absorbed by the human mind. So, should I read everything? Maybe it's going to make more sense. So, on the spiritual level, the discarnate man will deal more directly with a living, multiform fluid, steady and inescapable, to be born from his own soul, since we can define it to some extent as a byproduct of the cosmic fluid absorbed by the human mind. Transubstantiating it under its own responsibility. So what does it mean? It means that the mind, the spirit, can manipulate the cosmic fluid. I hope this makes sense. So we have this picture here. Let's read this and then make a comment. This fluid is your own continuous thinking, generating energetic potentials with which you had not dreamed. So it tells about the power of thoughts. So we have read this. I don't know how to translate this to English, but you all understand when I say the word umbral. So these suffering zones in which we hear things that about monsters and things that we cannot imagine that are present there. So why does that happen? Oh, because when we have a region in which a lot of spirits are in an unstable mind situation, if it makes any sense, so what happens is that they all will emit unstable thoughts. Thoughts of suffering, thoughts of fear. So all those thoughts are emanate from them. And what will happen to the matter surrounding them? Well, it will be manipulated by those thoughts. And eventually, things will be created from those thoughts. Like we can play with dough. We get a bunch of dough, we start to manipulate it, and we create a dinosaur, or a plate, or nothing, or a worm. So that's what we do with the matter in that situation. So in the greater world, in the mental health chapter, astonished, I noted that for the first time that the radiations emitted by the brain contain essential differences. Each motor center was marked with the diverse peculiarities through the radiant forces. So this is, Andrea is observing things. The entity, unaware of our presence, by virtue of the circle of coarse vibrations in which it stood, fixating all attention on the patient, remembering the wit of a feline watching over the prey. So, in this case here, they were observing a spirit in a less progressed state. So, in that spirit was focusing something and so concentrated that all he could tune on was that thing. I hope it makes sense. Okay, let's talk about behavior. So, in Thought and Life, chapter 1, the mind is the mirror of life everywhere. In human souls, it arises between the illusions that lead to intelligence, talking about the mind. The brain is the center of its undulations, generating the force of thought that moves everything, creating and transforming, destroying and remaking to purify and sublimate. So that's what the thought does. The thought does everything when we come to our transformation, with the things we can do as discarnate. The reflection sketches the emotivity. Emotivity shapes the idea, and the idea determines the attitude and the word that commands the actions. Okay, so this is how we change. If we want to change something, we have to go through this process, don't we? We have to reflect upon it. We have to change our minds, having new ideas about things, and those ideas may convert into action, attitude. Does it make sense? Any question, anyone? Is it clear? So, same again, thought of life. So no one can exceed by improvisation the resource of his own mind. Yep. So if we don't train our minds to work well, we will be limited by its capacity or how much. It's like if we all possibly decide to compete with someone that's in good shape in a short distance race, we could even have a heart attack, couldn't we? Because we have to be fit to do that. Same thing with the mind. The mind can be trained. We all point out the influence of one on another within our relative capacity for assimilation. We breathe into the world of images we project and receive. So then again, if you have good thoughts, if you sync yourself in good vibrations, in good thoughts, you'll be living in that context. If you like to have self-pity, you think you are the worst person on the planet, that you suffer more than everybody else, and you are so sorry about yourself, you will live in that context. So we live in the context, in the images we project and receive. By these images, we partake under the fascination of the elements that provisionally enslave us, and through them we incorporate the renewing influence of the powers that induce us to purification and progress. The mental reflex dwells on the foundation of life. So our life, both as spirit and as incarnate or humans, is a reflect of how our minds are. Okay? One day you are very well, next day you are in hell. Yeah? So I don't know if you ever heard this before, but it sounds kind of says things we go through. Okay, so Emmanuel teaches that the brain is the center of its undulations, generating the force of thought that moves everything, creating and transforming, destroying, remaking, to purify, sublime, and sublimate. So we have seen this before, but this is just to reinforce the idea. So the brain is the center of everything, of the undulations. What undulations are they? Well, the thought waves, aren't they? Chapter 22. The pathological symptoms in the overwhelming majority of ordinary experience stem from unhappy reflections of the mind on the vehicle of our manifestations. So there is this story about this doctor that was in his workplace, and this patient arrived, and she had a receipt instruction from the doctor, and they said, well, to Miss Mary, she had a disease, so treatment, forgive. And she said, well, look at the absurd, your colleague gave me this thing, and in his mind he read it, and he said, and he saw himself saying, well, did it work? And then he thought, of course not. So increase the dosage. Because there's many immune diseases that are related to how badly we hurt ourselves in our minds. There seem to be associations between, for instance, cancer and lack of forgiveness or self-hate, or loss of mental states. Because when we put ourselves in a permanent state of mind, which are not beneficial, we might reap the consequences, if it makes sense.
And I guess only now, like medicine is kind of exploring a little bit more further the effects on the mind and the way you feel about yourself, your environment, and the reflection of your body, on your body, isn't it?
Yes.
I know that they say even your DNA can be reprogrammed because of your lifestyle and the way you live and see your life. It can be effects to that level.
Yes,
All your
DNA can be changed.
Yeah.
So autoimmune disease as well, like lupus or Crohn's disease, it has a lot to do with thoughts and emotions.
Okay, so every thought is a wave of creative force. Well, we have seen this before, but we have to keep talking about it because it appears in different places. And the thoughts of peace and fraternity emitted by the group in that context will constitute an adequate climate of benign radiations. Okay, so this was a context when a group was possibly in some disobsession situation. So the group, when they gather and they pray together, they could be emitting a very positive thought, everybody collectively, so that enhances the power. There was a situation, I don't really know when, but that's what I heard, that there was this Spiritist gathering, a conference, and about 500 people were there, and they were asked to pray, to join in prayer, and the energy emitted by that collective effort was such that it broke the resistance of one very heavy suffering zone, liberating out of spirits trapped there. So it's just amazing the power of a good thought. Okay, so our thoughts defined by vibrations, words and acts flow from a specific race. Yeah? The thought is a force that determines, establishes, transforms, edifies, destroys, and reconstructs. So everything is a byproduct or is changed by the right thought, if it makes sense. Oh, that's true. Oh, that's honest. Oh, that's noble. Oh, that's pure. Oh, that is holy. be in every hour of life the light of your thoughts. So then again, the thought is the central element of our existence, if it makes sense. It defines everything. It puts us in the right state of mind, it puts us in the wrong state of mind. It connects us with the right people, it connects with the not so right people. It chains us to the towing truck or to the anchor. It's our choice. So we're now in vampirism, so this is the context. It is that through the magnet of unhealthy and uncontrolled thinking, man provokes upon himself the fluid contamination of unbalanced entities. So when we are emitting unhealthy and uncontrolled energy through our thoughts, we attract unbalanced entities that will see the opportunity to find a source of whatever they need. For instance, we know that when you like too much of a drinking, which is not something that happens in some European countries, we could be attracting a discarnate spirit that feels the need for that sensation of the alcohol being ingested. And keep in mind one thing, discarnate don't get drunk, so they might need more and more and more and more, or they might want that. So through his own ungoverned thought, he can manufacture for himself the most serious outbursts of mental alienation. So the point is, once we don't synchronize or we don't establish ourselves in a good mood thinking, or thinking mood, we could attract people that could be in need of that lack of stability, and that could transform them in our permanent companions, if it makes sense. So this is still about the thought. So heaven as the spatial abode of beauty really exists because we cannot imagine paradise erect on a swan. Yet above all else, heaven is the range of glorified thoughts to which we conform. So heaven is a state of mind. We are in heaven when we feel well, when we are well, when we are having the right state of mind. Hell is the network of tortured thoughts in which we let ourselves be caught. So we can be in heaven and in hell almost in the same minute, depending on how we feel. Sometimes something happens to us and we suffer for it so much that we think we are the worst creatures in the whole planet or universe, and yet 1 hour later we don't even remember we passed for that. So it is a state of mind. Thought lies at the base of our manifestations. So reasoned thinking is the greatest achievement we have ever achieved on earth. So that's reasoned thinking. So happiness is the right thinking, and misfortune is the form of thinking. Does it make sense? So we have the gift of reason. We can use reason. And then we can be happy or unhappy. It's always our choice. So about the feeling, the thought is the matrix that we compose in the intimacy of being, with which it's possible to create infinite manifestations of our individuality. The elevated feeling generates the elevated thought, and the elevated thought guarantees the elevation of existence. The thought is the root of the action. By thinking, we create our destiny. I hope this makes sense. I have a feeling that I'm starting to repeat myself. But this is pretty much a collection of sources we're going through. And they all have to say the same thing. They cannot say conflicting things, I hope. So this is about justice. So however our structures made me recognize that I was not punished except by myself, that the image of my dying father in the terrible bathroom was the fixation of my soul on the intimate picture that my mind vitalized in constant remorse. So sometimes we freeze ourselves in a moment and we enter in a loop, don't we? Suffering for that thing. Well, I don't know because I don't remember, but they say that when you commit suicide, if you do that, if you go through that route, in heaven and hell, there are testimonies, and there's a spirit that jumped from a tower in Rouen, France, and his testimony is that, well, the sensation I experience is that I see the stones, the ground, the pavement approaching, but I never hit it, so he keeps falling, keeps falling, keeps falling, keeps, imagine this, every day, for years and years, you're falling, never ending. So, his mind is fixated in that second, that instant of his experience. Okay? The therapy of prayer. So the advice of the honest, suitable specialist acts by donation of new thought forms in support of the sick prayer. So there are experiences that say that when someone prays for someone that was ill, even if the target doesn't know that someone is praying for him or her, there is improvement in the health condition. Okay, so why is that? Well, because we are sending the right energy, and sometimes that helps the body to reach or to get a better balance. Through the unbalanced thoughts that just oppose with our intimate life. So here it says that, well, the good and the not so good. So this is the consequence. Unbalanced thoughts will affect our intimate life. And the donation of new thought forms can help whatever is in need. I hope this makes sense. So then again, it's the same thing. Self-healing. Without your thought purifying itself and without your will commanding the bolt of the organization towards the good, the intervention of the human remedies will not pass from measuring transit to the uselessness. So, if you have an autoimmune disease, for instance, you can take the medicine that you want and you'll never be healed. I don't know if that's possible to be healed in that situation, but to have a stable condition whilst your mind doesn't synchronize in the right frequency, the right vibration, the right state of mind, I hope. You all agree with that? Okay, so thought is our creative ability in action. The idea forms the condition produces the effect creates fate. So this is our fate, isn't it? Whatever happens to us is because of this. It starts in our thoughts and our ideas, and then those will produce effects, and the effects are our fate, or will take us to our fate. Your life will always be what you are constantly mentalizing. Through the mental principles that govern us, everything we give from ourselves to others we will receive from others hundredfold. Is this too tedious? Do we need something more dynamic?
No. That's fine.
Okay, now something interesting. More dynamic, perhaps. So, effects on the perispirit and on the physical body. So, before we go into more slides and people start sleeping on the chairs, only the incarnate ones, of course, because the discarnate left a long time ago. Okay, so, is the perispirit made of matter or not made of matter?
Semi-matter, no?
It's matter, but in a very, very
Subtle.
very low density, if I could say that. So it's very, very fine matter. So then, because of the amount of, let's just make a reminder here, or there's no distinction between energy and matter. It's the same thing in different presentations, like ice and vapor. Not like that, but if we condensate a lot of energy, we'll get matter. So matter is condensed energy. So of course, we have so much matter in us that we have so much condensed energy in us that somehow this isolates us from perceiving the more fluidic things, less dense things. So if the perispirit is made of very, very fine, low density matter, it should be easily shaped by the thought. So it's not unusual for us to read in certain publications that some spirit presents himself or herself with a body, and in another occasion with another one, because they have the ability to reshape their perispirit with the surrounding elemental matter or the cosmic fluid. I hope everybody's comfortable with this idea and it makes sense. If I'm saying something nonsense, please correct me. Don't agree with me just because I'm standing. So, okay, so we can see that, well, if I can reshape my perispirit with the power of my mind, it means that our perispirits will be affected by our thoughts. Yep. Okay, and we know that for every cell in our physical body, there is corresponding something in our perispirit. There is a perfect mirror image, one of another. Are you all happy with that? So we know that if we affect our perispirit, we will affect our body. If we affect our body, we will affect our perispirit. It's not unusual for people that without a leg or a limb that discarnate, their perispirit manifests itself without the limb. But the spirit doesn't have actually any limb. That's a representation, a manifestation of the spirit, the perispirit. Does it make sense? Am I talking nonsense?
Yes, you are, but let's carry on. Let's pretend you're not.
Okay, so if this is our perispirit and this is our physical body, we have an etheric double, and that's all I'm going to talk about energy. In this context, this is the only slide we'll see this way. So the point here is that, well, we have the chakras or the center of energy, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There could be more, but let's be happy with those for now. So we have the center of energy, and the energy will, if someone gets into spiritual healing, or that's one of the things we were discussing before the presentation, we started this conversation, the translation from healing into English is a pass. That doesn't help. So whenever someone is receiving any energetic influence, whether willing or not, the energy will find its way through the centers of energy and will flow through the etheric double into the physical body. That's how external energy goes into the physical body, through this path. I hope it makes sense. And that's how the energy that we transmit from our body will flow as well, through the same route, just opposite. Okay, so why is it useful to have an incarnate providing spiritual healing to another incarnate? Well, because although the healing should be directed by a discarnate, the right energies are amplified by our bodies. I hope this makes sense. Yeah? Okay? So we have the vital centers, and this is just representation. So these are the means by which most of the energy that we gather or emit pass through our ways of communication, our small antennas in our bodies. Does it make sense to all of you? And of course, different types of energies, they have preferential paths or routes or antennas. So the lower frequencies, more connected to the earth, if this symbol makes any sense, the more dense energies connect to the base chakra, the base of these centers, and the more divine through the top chakra, the top energy center. Does it make sense? Okay.
Can I just add that
Yes.
each chakra also corresponds to a center, physical center, I mean,
Yes.
in our body, isn't it?
Mhm.
So you have like clusters physically in our body
Yeah.
where the blood
Concentrations of
circulates,
nerves.
concentration of nerves, and where our glands are placed throughout our body as well. And they are secreting all the hormones and things for our body to be sustained and function. So it's just very, very interesting that, you know, although we are talking about chakra and spiritual body, but then in a physical body, you have, as you said, that
Oh, there's a
mirror,
parity.
yeah, that
There's a
mirror
parity,
that
yes.
is
Yes,
there.
there's a parity.
Mm.
So the idea, well, we're talking about the thought. So the purpose of this is just to call attention to the fact that, well, we have centers of energy that we capture or transmit, that different types of energy, if it makes any sense. In types, I mean different frequencies. What is a frequency? Well, if you have an AM radio in your car and you tune in 530, you won't be listening to any FM broadcast station, will you? No, you won't listen to that one. So that's what we are calling frequency at least in this context. Okay, so more dense, lower frequencies, more defined, higher frequencies. Okay, in a greater word, studying the brain. So about two friends in their mind, with their minds set in the region of the primary instincts. So they incarnate after repeating vibrations in the field of thought, running from remembrance and remorse, ruin the motor centers, disorganizing the endocrine system, and disturbing the vital organs. So this is something that we destroy our own body by within our own thoughts, destructive thoughts. That's what it says. The discarnate converted all its energy feeding the idea of revenge, accepting the hatred in which he keeps out reason and altruism. So there was this pair here, the incarnate and the discarnate, and these had held a grudge on this one here. So that's what is happening. All its energy fixated, all his power, everything he had fixated in the idea of revenge against the incarnate. And the incarnate, with remembrance and remorse, destroying himself with those thoughts. Reinforced by this one that wouldn't let go, of course. So this one wants to suffer, this one wants to hurt him, so that's a perfect couple, isn't it?
Yeah, this particular scenario, which also reflects to a whole lot of different scenarios in our lives, this feels a little bit like asking who came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, is it the alive person remorse that attracted the other spirit, or the other spirit that helps provoke the remorse, and how do we break the cycle?
Well,
That's
in
the
this
big
case
question.
here, keep in mind one thing. If you want to feel remorse, you open the door. If you if you accept your responsibility in something not so good that you did, but you shield yourself by not allowing access, you can do that. You have you just close all spaces and you are insulated from it, or isolated from it. So this spirit only had access to this one because this one was in that state. Throughout our incarnations, I doubt we never did something bad. I doubt it. We might have friends following us till nowadays, claiming what they believe was taken from them by us. But they will never get to us if we don't allow them to. It's like you are in the second story of a house. I want to hold you, but I'm on the ground floor and I don't have a ladder. So I can try all my best, I can jump, but I'll never reach you. If it makes sense. So it starts on you. How are you? Mind-wise. Are you alright? Are you okay? Are you thinking about the right things? Or are you thinking about the not so right things? Are you thinking about the good things or not so good things? So how much access do you want to give to those who want access to you or to anyone? Because they are the opportunistic situations, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Or entities that they seize an opportunity and they grab it. So in this case, it was someone that did something wrong to someone else, and because the remorse allowed him to get in misery, and this one used the opportunity to make it worse. So Jesus Christ had plenty of reasons for recommending love to enemies and prayer for those who persecute and slander us. Is this not a mere virtue, but a scientific principle of liberation from being, of progress of the soul, or spiritual amplitude? In thought lies the causes. So everything that happens to us, everything we do, all the roots are in our thoughts. Fraternal support. So, in this case, let's focus on the bull here. So, analyzing thoughts clutched him in his sick brain, heavy vibrations characterized by very dark color, descended from the forehead and were fixed in the respiratory system. So, the state of mind of that person, his sick brain, generated those heavy vibrations, and they descended from the forehead to the respiratory system, hence imposing a problem. This material from the disturbed mind, imprinted on the physiological mechanism, was assimilated by the blood, which in turn restored it to the physical brain. So it's a loop, isn't it? So we generated this poisonous thought, it poisons the body and comes back to the brain, making us feel, well, physically worse. Does it make sense? The mad mind emits destructive forces, which, if they can reach others, reach, in the first place, the organic cosmos of the emitter. So what's this? Well, think of me as an antenna. So if I'm sending this energy to the universe, and it's spreading 360, 360, 360 everywhere, all the energy has to pass through me. All of it. So guess who gets the biggest amount of energy? The transmitter, isn't it? So me as an antenna, I will feel and I'll get the consequences of all that energy, good or bad. Or not so good, no use the word bad. Hope it makes making sense. So, strange illness. Fabrizio's bankrupt mind, experiencing persistent remorse and distressing preoccupations, intoxicated the vital centers with ceaseless emission of corrupting energies. So then again, it's another example of someone in a bad state of mind Imagine this, if he discarnated at that very moment, and he would be immediately attracted by the law of affinity to a region of suffering. With this mind, imagine if he was free of the matter, of the shield of the matter, what he could perform with the surrounding matter around him. Then he could produce monstrosities or monsters or strange figures. Does it make sense? Are you reading?
I'm fine, yeah, no, I'm just,
So the thoughts of revolt and revenge issued by all those who he deliberately offended crushed his spiritual body for over 100 consecutive years. So in this case, we're talking about someone that, well, it doesn't really matter, but the thing is the effect on the spiritual body because of thoughts. Okay? The implacable adversaries, clinging to him through direct influence, compelled his mind to fix himself on automatic impulses, on the empire of the instincts. So sometimes if we allow access from others onto us, we might be diverted and focus, don't reason anymore. You know that we have 3 sections in the brain. So I don't want to go too much there, but the bottom of the brain is our primary instincts, our animal side. So sometimes we see in the work of undergraduates that some incarnate are so badly hurt that they only the first third of the brain works, so they are back to their instincts. And there's no reasoning. You just lose control of everything. You just become just an animal, if it makes sense. So that's here. That's explained here. Is it making sense? Does anyone want to ask any question? So the thought of the incarnated mind acts upon the spiritual fluids as that of the discarnated spirit thought acts. So it doesn't matter whether we are incarnated or not, our thoughts will act over fluids. And keep in mind on one thing, spiritual fluids in this thing is just a manifestation of the cosmic fluid. And we're talking about energy, electromagnetic waves. Is it making sense? Since the fluids of an ambient are modified by the projection of the spirit's thoughts, so see, the fluids are of an ambient, so the energy in an ambient is modified by the projection of the thoughts. So his spiritual body, which is a constituent part of his being, and which receives directly in a permanent way the impressions of his thoughts, should receive even more so the impressions of his good and bad qualities. So this is from inside out, isn't it? So when I have, whatever thought I have, I will impact my perispirit. Who has a one-to-one correlation with the perispirit? The physical body, isn't it? So when I produce an impact on my perispirit, I will produce an impact in my on my physical body. Does it make sense? There's a pairing there, isn't it? Fluids being the vehicle of thought, the latter, or the thought of the later, acts upon them as the sound does upon air. They bring us the thought just as the air brings us the sound. So it's communication of energy through thinking. They bring us the thought just as the air brings us the sound. In such fluids, there are waves and rays of thoughts that cross each other without ever becoming entangled. Like if I start using my mobile phone here, and someone else starts using his or her mobile phone as well, in different calls, one will not influence the other or interfere with the other. So that's what it says. The thought creates fluid images and reflects itself back on his spiritual body and on a mirror, as on a mirror. The thought takes on body and somehow photographs itself on it. Okay? A man has the idea of murdering someone. Although his material body is inactive, his fluidic body is, through the thought, put into action. So every time we think of killing someone or beating someone, nobody here would do that, of course. No, we wouldn't ever think about it. We actually do it in an energetic sense. Okay? So reproducing from these all vibrations. The thought creates the image of the victim, and similar to a picture, the entire scene is drawn precisely as it is in his spirit. Okay? So once we think of something not so good, that's recorded as an act or as an intention, which in principle, in moral principle, is the same. Does it make sense? It's not really that, but it's almost the same. Well, the fact that we actually don't kill someone, that's already an advance, isn't it? Okay, the soul is not an abstraction, for he knows that it possesses an eternal body which makes of it a real and definite being, susceptible of being conceived of as such by our thought. So, to be conceived as such by our thought, so we can conceive it, we can imagine it. Is it making sense, people? Would like to make a break? Okay, so now everybody is happy, feeling filled. So let's carry on. There are a few slides that are just examples of situations, and they are only here to reach the presentation, or the discussion. So I might run through them a little bit fast. But then again, if you have any comment, don't hesitate and ask or stop me. Just don't throw anything to not hurt me. But anyway, so we have seen this already. So here is about health. So the committed thought operates in our mind a state of disturbance, but also the waves of grief and accusation of the victim and those who are associated with the feeling. So this is about harmony, mental harmony. So when we feel that we feel guilty about something that affects us. Also, whatever waves of thoughts from the outside that reaches us, that can affect us if we allow them, if our defenses are not raised. Our deep sick emotions, wherever they may be, generate 6 states. So states of mind. The process of mental life elaboration are positively influential on diseases. We talked about it. So this is why it's important for us to keep a good state of mind, so we can balance our bodies through our own mental emissions. Remember that we are the antennas, so wherever we transmit, we emit, all the energy will flow through us, and some will remain. The pathological symptoms in the overwhelming majority of ordinary experience stem from the unhappy reflections of the mind on the vehicle of our manifestations, operating maladjustments in the implements that compose it. So, maladjustments. So, we affect ourselves, our thoughts affect ourselves. All mental tension causes disturbances of importance in the physical body. Okay, I think there's nothing to question or argue about this statement here. So it's law, so to speak.
My back knows that.
Well, That's one of the things. Well, we have to keep one thing in mind. Let's make a quick pause here. Although we forget that, we have an incarnational program. So our bodies, they are the bodies that we need to do our adjustment, to adjust wherever this adjustment we have in our, as spirits. So sometimes, if we have that back pain, or we have a knee that hurts, it's not coincidence. It's a coincidence. It's not for nothing. There's a reason for it. Sometimes, well, it's us because of our state of tension has consequences, like and sometimes it's because, well, it's said in the Spiritist philosophy, isn't it? Sometimes we face problems that are consequences of previous existences, and sometimes consequences of our current existence. So sometimes we have pains and or small disturbances, imbalances, and they are because our bodies were designed to be that way, so we could experience those moments of pleasure. And sometimes we impose them on ourselves with the wrong or not so balanced state of mind. So dark thinking makes the body sane and aggravates the use of the sick body. So it's imperative to avoid the unregulated souls that impose degrading imbalances. This is the effect on the body, isn't it? We're talking about here, ourselves. So cultivating pain and disgust, irritation and hurt is the same as sowing magnetic forms and fertilizing them in the emotional soil of our existence. I don't think it can be more clear than this. Only at the price of our ceaseless mental renewal for good, we can change that. Okay, so this is what we will have to, one of the things we have to learn, isn't it, in our incarnational experiences. Mental renewal. This is one of the things, and sometimes we do that through the pains we impose on ourselves, through the physical body. In the extraction of resources essential to the creation of thought forms, with a view to the transformation of the companions demented, we try to help. So you see, the point is resources essential to the creation of thought forms. So what are thought forms? When we said about the zones of suffering, all those suffering are imbalanced, mentally imbalanced spirits emitting that suffering thoughts. They will manipulate the matter around them, and they will create what their minds are creating, if it makes sense. So we emit a thought of unstable thought, and that will manipulate, and that will, whatever I have fear, for instance, I could create outside, and that would feed my fear. So it's a vicious circle, if it makes sense. Okay, it's necessary to offer them the best material of our thoughts. So we're talking about those who are suffering, aren't we? In this context here. So the transformation of the companions demented, we try to help. So what is the demented? It's someone in an unstable or in the wrong state of mind, isn't it? So in this context here, they are trying to help and offer them the best material of our thoughts, so of their thoughts. So the good thought is the way they have to help those in suffering. Everybody here is discarnated, by the way, in this context here. So it's just examples. In this case here, there was this person, and for many years I remained in that house while the irresponsible poisoning the very medication administered to him. I was able to donate her until the day she was led into a prayer circle. And in this circle, your friends found me. They found me and brought me to this house So the chamber of the crime disappeared from my imagination. All the stagnant ideas that limited my thinking suddenly dissolved like scales of mud that in disintegrated freed my spirit. So it was a spirit, there was a prisoner in the room that where he or she, I don't remember, committed a crime. And that's it, he was there. So his thinking was limited to that situation that would repeat itself forever. It would enslave him there. So then, it was that thought, that layer that held him there, was dissolved by the circumstance. So then again, the spirit, the discarnate spirit, was enslaved in a situation like someone who commits suicide is. That repeats or that holds the person there, or the spirit there. So we're talking about discarnate morphologic lines. So the individual form itself obeys the dominant mental reflex. So the individual form obeys the dominant mental reflex. So the dominant mental reflex is the state of mind of the discarnate, isn't it? I'm thinking about the discarnate here. So if that's the case, as you project your state of mind through your thinking, through your thoughts, you may create forms outside, like in the zones of suffering, the umbral, for instance. The mind is externalized in the spiritual vehicle with the admirable precision of spontaneous control over the subtle cells that constitute it. So let's go back to the paragraph here. Discarnation frees all spirits of masculine and feminine character who are in reincarnation in an inverted conditioning attending to the necessary or the specific task, because outside of the physical framework, the mind is externalized in the spiritual vehicle with how we feel ourselves. So in this context here, sometimes we need to incarnate we are so much comfortable or used to one gender that we incarnate in the opposite gender to actually soften us, or sometimes to show us how it is to be, because we need to have a range of experiences, don't we? The mental oscillations of the patient condense mechanically in the direction of the restorative work, starting to suggest it to the cellular entities of the vehicle of the body in which they express themselves, and the millions of corpuscles of the physiopsychosomatic, I will learn English eventually, of the physiopsychosomatic organism tend to obey instinctively the orders received, attuned to the purpose of the spirit command that adds them. So this is the body obeying the mind, isn't it? Yeah? Even with my poor English. So our thoughts are nothing more than relatively volatile magnetic modes. Yep. So we emit these magnetic modes, and the matter will be shaped by these modes, if it makes sense. These thought forms, on the other hand, change progressively from the moment they are created by the action of the magnetic fields of the environment. So, in this case, if we are in a zone of suffering, for instance, and we emit this unstable thought, and we create a form, it says that the magnetic field of the environment will make it worse, or will change it depending on how it is. So if I create a form and I have 25 people in not so good mental states, they will create the average or the absolute magnetic field where I am. Does it make sense? So a collection of spirits will influence each other and the environment they are. So when something is created by one or a group, it could be enhanced by the collectivity. It makes sense. Okay, this is from a presentation that's available on YouTube. So this gentleman here stated, thought is plasma, it has a strength of ideoplasty that would be the thought form. he shapes thought forms. If I think about the good, I will shape a good form, a form that brings joy, which brings hope, which brings courage. If I think negatively, I will idealize a destructive thought form, which will bring sickness to people. Then again, thought as a manipulating energy, constructive energy. Constructive not in a positive sense, but in a way that constructs things or builds things. In every circumstance, let us raise our thoughts to God and embrace them. So this is, what is that? So we are under God's protection. No evil can do us harm. So that relates to the question you asked. So if we can synchronize ourselves, tune ourselves with the right level of energies, God being the perfect reference, then we are in that frequency, aren't we? That vibration. So we are not accessible to destructive things. Wow. So spirit, now we have thought, feeling and will, as they form the mental current which under the command of the will act upon the matter and fluids to transform them into. Okay, so then again, effects of thoughts. In the external limits of the aura, one can perceive the presence of energetic vortices in charge of channeling to the physical body the energy that transits through the perispirit. So this, then again, this goes back to that picture we saw. Originating from elaborations, synthesis or absorptions of the spirit. Okay, then it talks about the chakras again, but just to complement it. So the perispirit of the incarnates, because of the identical nature of the spirit of fluids, due to the law of magnetic attraction, functioning spontaneously at the instant of the incarnation process, acquires the characteristics of each individuality by formalization and the sentiments of each intelligent being. From then on, these characteristics are modified according to the actions practiced, becoming more or less denser. Does it make sense? Did I lose someone here? Okay, only the incarnates now. So we're still talking about fluids here. So in the condition of being integral, composed of spirit, and somatic body, participant of this universe where everything and everyone interact, man influence and is influenced incessantly, registering with more intensity the field of those beings that he needs more to evolve. It focuses on people and things, thoughts and substance, variance at each evolutionary stage through which it transits. There is a kind of osmosis of physical nature, so it means that everything affects everything. So I'm affecting you, you're affecting me. When the spirit, incarnate or discarnate, manifests itself, thinks, thinking, acting, or simply existing, all its power vibrating in turn the cosmic fluid, imprinting on those changes that give it appearance, movement, and direction. So just by existing, we are, by the power of our thoughts, manipulating the fluids around us, the cosmic fluid, and therefore influencing the universe. That's how powerful we are. The fluids from the psychic atmosphere of conscious beings, supplying the elements with which they operate by the force of thought and will. Supplying the elements with which they operate by the force of thought and will. So that's what thought does, thought and will. Thought and will are to the spirits what the hand is to man. Of course, will, because, well, will is the wish to do things, isn't it? Well, will says what it is by itself. By thought they imprint such fluids on this or that direction, they agglomerate, combine or disperse, form with these materials, sets having a particular appearance, form, color, change, their properties, etc. Okay, so in sessions in which materialization happens, what happens there? Some more fluidic matter or some forms of energy is recombined into visible matter to us, isn't it? So they can imprint our eyes. Materialization, not really imprint our eyes, it could imprint our senses as well. Does it make sense? Am I talking nonsense here? Or you understand what I'm saying? From the moment in which such fluids are a vehicle of thought, they can modify their properties by impregnating them with the good or bad qualities of the thoughts themselves. So then again, we're talking about fluids and how we can impregnate fluids with the essence of our thoughts. The transformations that the intelligent beings promote in the fluidic atmosphere that surrounds them can be given either consciously or unconsciously. So if I am in a state of pain, mental pain or unbalanced, I am transmitting that state to the universe. Even if I don't have these, I don't know these consciously. Are you happy with this?
And we can feel on each other, isn't it? When we get in a room.
Sometimes you get in a room and you want to get out because
that person is irradiating such a.
Well, sometimes the person is not there anymore. It's just legacy, or sometimes it could be a discarnate as well. So sometimes you step into a lift and there's someone there, and you feel one, oh, that's the vibration of the person, is the mental state of that person. So it's about healing, mediumship, and spiritual surgeries with the aid of a kind of magnetization of fact or by thought. So then again, it's talking about the power of thought. That's what I want to address there. Or from one's own mental constructions. So when we think about something, we construct something, we build something. Thought, whenever we think about something in the universe, we create that thing. Perhaps it's not going to affect us in the short term, in our material existence, but the universe is impacted by that. Remember when I said about when we think about killing someone, for instance, or harming someone, in principle we did that. And the universe is imprinted with that action, or that intent. So now we're talking about past therapy. So such environments are those frequented by malicious, vicious and frivolous people becoming vigorously impregnated with their thoughts. So it doesn't matter what environment we're talking about. It matters that here, any environment will be impregnated by the thoughts of those who are in that environment. In order to undo ideoplastic constructions by the bystanders, you see, in this case, if it's valid to apply passes to undo ideoplastic constructions. So the point here is that, well, we do ideoplastic constructions, mental constructs, all the time. We're doing them. Or sustaining one we built. So our state of mind will reinforce them, or will build new ones, but they will reflect our state of mind, if it makes any sense. The mental constructions express themselves easily, giving rise to ideoplastias of various constants, manifesting themselves in thought forms, destructive vibrants, sometimes with terrifying characteristics and longer fixations, or undoing all those. Okay? But in this context here, it's focusing on the benefits of the past, or the spiritual healing. I don't like this word past that I mentioned before, because it could give the wrong idea. So most of our concerns are due to mental constructions it much easier than I thought. So some people say, well, I suffered so much before the time and it made so much easier than I thought. So sometimes our state of mind makes us suffer in anticipation for something that in the end isn't that much. Most of our concerns are due to mental constructions. We fear something, and that's already enough to beat us, isn't it? So we fail because we fear. Sometimes we don't even confront the situation because of the fear of being defeated by it. That's a mental state. Prayer is an evocation which attracts the spirit. Then again, prayer is just a chain that I send in one's direction, isn't it? So I could be chaining myself to a tow truck or to an anchor. So a prayer, in principle, is supposed to be directed to evoke spirits and for good reasons. But we can also pray to not so good spirits. Yeah? So, but in all such cases, it is the thought which acts on the spirit. So it's always the thought that acts on the spirit. The spirit doesn't have a ground to stand. If you try to beat the spirit with a baseball bat, nothing's going to happen, is it?
Would you say that
It's best way.
the thought that we emit is actually the force that will throw, as you say, that chain
That's the chain.
in whatever direction?
That's the chain. It will reach someone somewhere. Okay, thought. So, what is it? What it is? Then again, I don't know. It's something that happens inside of my head. What it does, I'm going to skip it and I'll put all of them here. So it connects me to the universe. Not to the whole universe, but to specific points of the whole universe as well. It affects my directly physically, it affects me directly, physically, mentally, and it affects who I think of. Yep. Okay, there are a few messages that I think I'll skip some because these could possibly encourage you to read it. Man can be considered the thought that exercises, nurtures, and nurtures. Thought is the manifestation of the spiritual longing of the being, and thought is strength. I think we have come to these statements in other ways so far. Everything can be altered under the action of thought. Yep. Thought and life then are terms of the existential equation of the human being. Are you all happy with this sentence here? This is a valid conclusion for the things we have discussed today. Yet this companion, a young Christian woman, assures him of the tranquil home with his presence by the abundant and permanent emission of purifying and luminous forces from which his spirit nourishes himself. So the point here is that there is a spirit that emits these purifying and luminous forces. And what happens? Well, the home becomes filled by that energy. So in ways, this is what happens to us when we do the gospel at home. Because we create a state that we attract benefactors. We create a state of mind for us. We impregnate the matter around us with that positive energy that will be there for longer. So in this here, revealing herself in fervent prayer, sublime lights surrounded her, and I could tune in with her most intimate expressions. So sublime, she was in prayer, and these lights surrounded her. What are these lights? It's not a flashlight, it's not a torch. It's an emission, because she was receiving energy, because she was channeled with someone at some point, some source of high energy, of good energy, and this energy was coming through her, and she was irradiating it. So she was an antenna of good energy. Her heart was turned into a burning focus of light, from which came many resplendent particles, projecting itself over the body and the soul of the spouse. So then again, energy that was irradiating from her, because she was sinking with a source of good energy, so to speak. The radiant corpuscles penetrated his body in all directions, and particularly in the sex zone, where he had identified such great psychic anomalies. They concentrated in mass, destroying the small dark forms of the vampirism. So it was the fact that a person was incarnated, person had these physical problems that our science cannot see yet, and then the energy coming to his body produced this effect. Okay, then neutralizing the bad, the cause of his physical problem, which were these dark forms of divine vampirism. Okay, please read the book, it's very good. Okay, so prayer, elevated meditation, edifying thought refound the atmosphere, purifying it. That's why we should do the gospel at home. High thinking sanctifies the surrounding atmosphere and possesses electrical properties that the average man is far from imagining. In the books from galleries, very often he visits help institutions in the spiritual world, and they all have electrical defenses against suffering spirits that surround in those facilities, so to speak. So there it is. The exchange of thought is free movement in the universe. So thought goes anywhere. Each mind is a true world of emission and reception, and each attracts those who resemble it. So there is this thing of affinity. So if I am in a good vibration, a good synchrony, if I can say that, I will sync with alike minds and energies. If I am in a not so good state, I will sync with that not so good state alike as well. So the prayer, gather together for the continuity of localized magnetic swaps, recalcitrant of all situations and all of times, segregate detestable forces and create horrifying forms, because all mental matter is clothed with shaping and exteriorizing force. Okay? So what's happening here? So the prayer allows us to do swaps, replacing bad energy or not so good vibrations by good ones. Does it make sense? Does this slide make sense to all of you? All of you.
I know we are talking about prayer now, but can you say, for example, if someone is meditating in a state of meditation, would it happen as well?
It's a very, 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 very difficult question for me to answer, because sometimes, well, I don't know what the person's purpose in meditating is. Sometimes we could see there could be the possibility of someone. So what's meditation? It's a state of emptiness, isn't it?
Well, it's focus of the mind, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's in nothing. Yeah. Meditating, when you meditate, you blank your mind, you don't think about anything. So you try to have no thoughts whatsoever. What does it do? Where does it lead you? I think that it depends on
I think it's like
deeper things.
Yeah, I think the
Balance
objective.
your energy.
Yeah, that's it. The objective of meditating is to balance your whole senses. So I think it is positive, yes.
Well,
Absolutely.
but I don't know what you do it for. I don't know if, let's say that you
You
are,
do it to find your psychological balance.
in what
So
if-
people, for
relieve-
example,
to relieve
before
stress, to
travel,
relieve
exactly.
sickness, to relieve pain.
everything that you spoke,
yeah, but imagine that I am someone that comprises and uses my own magnetism for not so good purposes. So I go into a state of meditation with the intention of balancing my body so I can do evil.
yeah, but
Does it make sense what I'm saying?
no, yes and no, because it's like eating good food. I think meditate for your body, for your organism, and as an intention is to balance it. As
Bring
simple
more
as that.
oxygen to your brain. Yeah.
It's just to release you from the stress and everything. It's like eating good food, so it could not be harmful. It's
Not for
I
the
mean,
body.
because
I think for the body is good, but I don't know what I have in mind
because
when I
the
do that. So
intention, the intention is positive. You said it, I think, when you responded. I think when you meditate, like you said, it's a state of emptiness, like you said it.
yeah.
I mean, I don't meditate. I mean, I meditate, yeah, in some moments I try to meditate to get my balance back, like you said. But we are always bombarded by our own good and bad thoughts and everything
Yeah.
that you said. So meditation per se, I think is a very positive intent of good practice, which leads anybody, or the objective of meditating is to get to your balance, to alleviate your stress.
I totally agree with you.
That's it.
When we
I
meditate,
didn't
we
understand
don't
the
think
question.
about.
Anything.
Meditate is not reasoning about something. It's a state of empty mind. Empty
Empty your
mind.
bad
I think
thoughts,
it's-
empty your good
To
thoughts.
allow
empty
your
your
energies.
thoughts, I think.
I will talk
Don't
to
worry,
you
you
in a
got
second.
it.
So to actually balance your body, but I don't know what you want to balance your body for.
Oh, but it's,
So it's a difficult question to answer in a closed form, if it makes sense.
Like if meditating would, like in a prayer, elevate you to a higher realm.
You could
so
take
that
you-
is,
Yeah, but in general, when you pray is one thing. When you meditate, you are not praying, because when you pray, you want to, in principle, you want to connect to some higher levels of spirituality. When you meditate, what you want is to blank out the mind,
yeah.
to not influence the body for a certain period of time, so the body can actually find some balance.
Yeah.
I think that that's.
I think if you think about your thoughts, and it's like a two-way road. That's the way I see it, because your thoughts, they impregnate the reaction of your thoughts go to your body, but vice versa as well. What you do to your body goes back and reflects on your self, on your spirit, on your spirit. So I think that, like you said, I think that the prayer is much more related to the spirit in terms of
Connection. Connection.
Connection
Connecting, yeah.
and clearing like a good thoughts and do all this cleanliness of the ambience and everything. And on the other hand, if you look about by the body perspective, it would be meditating would be to try to your body, your physical body, to get to an equilibrium, to a balance of your which either one, in my understanding, would be positive.
Yeah, just keep in mind one thing. For instance, in some religions in Brazil with African roots, sometimes you pray to entities to do harm, to cause harm.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. Meditation is to try and empty your mind. Praying is connecting to something.
Yeah, I see meditation not as like just emptying your mind, because there's many kinds of meditation out there. But you could think of meditation as getting to know yourself a bit better and preparing yourself for that balance. So I personally use meditation before prayer. So to stabilize myself, and then to pray, and then to elevate my thoughts. But what you do after meditation, and I think that's what Alex was saying, what you do after meditation is your own free will.
Free will, yeah, absolutely.
So
With your thoughts as well.
Absolutely.
With your thoughts as well. You can say something and have very bad thoughts, and then the energy that you are sending is going to be negative as well. It's your free will, absolutely. But I think it's positive in a sense, either if it's channeling your thoughts to something or.
Well, I think most of this discussion is coming to a close soon. Only missing 54 slides now. This is a book that someone, you know those emergency cards in airplanes? If there's a fire, you brace, all those instructions. So someone once said that once you learn about Spiritism, you should go straight and read this book, because this has a lot of useful information. You have an issue there. We didn't cover it in depth, just a few things here and there. But I think if you decide to study this, it could take you 3 years to move from page 1 to page 2. It's a very dense. It's like condensed milk or double cream. It's very thick. Now, there's one thing that
oh, I love
I would like to.
I love condensed.
Yeah. So there's something that I would like to call your attention. You might or not be curious about that thing in the corner there that all slides have.
I have no glass.
And well, some of you, the thing is, there's a few institutions that I like to promote. They don't pay me anything for that, and some of them don't even know I exist. But I like to promote because they help me in different ways through different challenging times. So you may or might know Alberto Almeida. So he's the public face of the Jardim dos Oliveiras, or Olive Garden, or Garden of the Olives, we decide how to call it. And it is an institution in one of the capitals of one of the states in the north of Brazil, Pará, and they are in Belém, in Pará. And they provide a lot of help, support to children mostly, in needed people, needed children. And they have this portal, which is www.jardineironet.com, wherever you want to spell it, which is a way, well, if you sign it, if you make me subscribe to it, not sign, subscribe to it, you have access to a lot of material that is quite useful or informative at least. Well, if you don't like it, just cancel it, but I think it's worth giving it a try. And the good thing, or the interesting thing, is that it only costs you £4 a month to support them. And you can subscribe using PayPal, you can subscribe using credit card, you can subscribe in ways that it's very, very helpful. And even if you think it's too much, 4 people can join and make one subscription. So what I'm saying is that, well, there are ways to help. Because sometimes we don't know, well, how can I do something effective beyond the things I'm already doing? Oh, well, you can help those who help, for instance. So I just would like to make this promotion or advertisement. And besides this, the only thing that I need to tell you is thank you.